Hi everyone! My name is Alyssa Vargas, and I'm going to be the teaching artist for BMCYF's The Space to Create program. So I'm going to be introducing you guys to the elements of art, and today is going to be on line. So you're going to have a packet that's going to be all about line, and I'm going to be doing a project with you guys, and you're either welcome to do the project I do, or you can do your own thing. So let's get started. The project we're going to do today is a great way to get started with line. The rectangle that you're going to see me working in is called my picture plane. So that's going to be the piece of paper that you're going to be drawing on today. So what I'm starting out doing is using my ruler to create some different sections. In each one of these sections, I'm going to be showing you an example of a different type of line and how you can use line. This is going to end up forming some really neat patterns, and it's going to create a nice little abstract piece. You can be as creative as you want with this part. I'm going to be using geometric shapes, but you're welcome to use any sort of shape. So you can use free-form shapes, you can use a heart, stars, you can form an image like a house, a dog, whatever you want. We're just really going to be doodling and making up as we go along. Once I'm done creating the outline, I'm going to begin filling in with patterns. So I'm going to start with something simple and easy, and this is going to be just some waves. I'm going to be using Sharpie markers today, but you're welcome to use whatever you have. So if you want to use Crayola markers or colored pencils or crayons, whatever you have, you're welcome to use. Now I'm going to be using red, and I'm going to create a dotted line. I'm going to try to create some variety by using different sizes of dots. I'm going to fill these dots in a little bit more, just because I like the way they look when they're a little bit larger. So I'm going to go back to this first rectangle because it doesn't really look complete yet. So what I'm going to do is use some hatching lines. These are thin lines that are close together that are going to be used for shading. Many artists use this technique to shade and build layers. Now I'm going to take a green pen and I'm going to start this triangle, and I'm going to use an example of spiral line. I'm now going to move on to the skinny rectangle, and what I'm going to do is show examples of dashed lines and some thick lines. I'm going to switch back and forth by doing every other line a thick line. If you're doing this project along with me, I would suggest doing all of these little patterns completely freehand. I wouldn't use a ruler because it takes a lot of the fun out of it. This project should be relaxing, so if you use a ruler for the entire thing, it's going to become a whole lot more time consuming. Now I'm just using my green and creating some scales. Next, I'm going to use diagonal line, and I'm going to make a checkered pattern. So once I finish these diagonal lines, I'm going to create horizontal lines, but these lines I'm going to make wavy. This will make this section sort of look like a flag. So in this section, I'm going to be showing you examples of hatching and cross-hatching and putting them next to each other. That way you can see the difference between the two and why cross-hatching is used for darker shading and why hatching is used for lighter shading. So I'm starting out with every other square and I'm doing just hatching starting out. I just noticed that I made a mistake here, but since I'm going to be going back over with cross-hatching, I'm going to leave it for now. So I'm now going to cross-hatch on all these. So basically what I'm doing is I went one way with my lines and now I'm going to go the opposite direction. And once you do that over top, it's going to create darker areas. So once I'm done here, I'm going to go back over these other sections and use just hatching lines. Here you can start to see that there definitely is a difference between the values when using hatching lines and then when using cross-hatching lines. We'll cover this more in depth in later sections. In this area, I'm going to be using line to build upon this square. And then I'm going to be filling in some of the sections to create thicker lines. This is also going to be a good example of positive and negative space, which you will also learn about later on. So I'm now just filling in these sections so that the lines are nice and thick. you'll start to see that these red lines kind of look like they're coming at you, and then the white areas look like there's an absence of anything there. So these red areas are the positive space, and then the white areas that look empty is the negative space. You don't have to really know this yet, but this is also the same for where I did the waves, where the areas that I hashed are the positive space, and then the areas that I left blank are the negative space. These work together to create balance in these sections. By this point, you've already used several types of line. So you've used cross-hatching and hatching. You've used spiral line, dotted line, dashed line. You've used diagonal lines, horizontal lines, vertical lines. The majority of lines that you learned about in your packet have already been used in this doodle. So now that we've already used an example of dotted line, I'm going to expand upon this and show you a way that you can shade using dots. The shading technique that I'm about to show you is called stippling. I'm going to be using dots to shade in every other rectangle. You start out by doing an even layer of dots, and then if you want it to get darker, you just continue to add more dots over top. This will start to create a darker value in those areas. So like I said, if you start adding more dots over top, you're going to get a darker value. So that's what I'm doing right here. What's creating the shading is these dots getting closer and closer together. Since these dots take a little bit more time, I'm going to skip ahead to the end of this section. This next example of line is going to be more of a zigzag. It kind of reminds me of almost a castle or a Lego. For fun in this section, I'm going to add some dots. Remember that you can be as creative as you want in these, and you can create any sort of pattern that you want. So you don't have to follow along with any of the ones that I'm doing, but if you want to, then that's great. But whatever you choose to do, try to show a variety of different types of line. This shows that you have a good understanding of the concepts that we've learned. In this section, I'm actually going to use the same idea that I used when beginning this piece. So I'm starting out with some lines going in different areas, in different directions, and then I'm going to start shading these with hatching and cross-hatching lines, but I'm going to keep some sections blank. As this area begins to develop, you'll start to see that it looks kind of similar as the entire image as a whole. Now I'm just going to be mixing these different types of line that we've learned and using some different ideas that I have to create some fun little patterns. There's no limit to what you can create here, and there's really nothing right or wrong. Here you can see me using some circles, and I'm using cross-hatching lines and filling in the area around it. Remember that you can use any colors you want to. I happen to be using red, green, blue, and black, but you can use anything that you want. You could just do an all pen drawing if you want to. The reason I'm using some colors is because I like the way it looks and how it makes the different sections pop. But these type of drawings look really nice even with no color at all. All I'm doing in this section is creating dashed lines at varying lengths. Now I'm using short, quick lines to create, it almost looks like flowers, or you might even say that they look like fireworks. Using these short, thin lines kind of gives a feathered effect to whatever you're drawing. Notice how it makes these objects look fuzzy or hairy. So here is the completed work of art. If you took part in this project and created your own doodle, please post and share your work with us, or return your projects so we can see what you've created. I hope you'll join me next week, where we're going to be covering the element of color. Thanks for watching!